Hello, friends and neighbors. This is Jeff coming to you with Spiritual Defense Radio down in the Rio Grande Valley, the southern outpost of the American District of the Kingdom of God. Today is a special day. I'm trying something new. I have a good old friend of mine back from my elementary school days moving forward. His name is Michael Felker, and I met him, goodness sakes, back at Dallas Christian, which is ironically in Garland, but whatever. But Michael, my friend, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very good, Jeff, and I think we even go back further than that. I think at church, when we were doing Bible Hour back as little kids at White Rock and going to all the VBSs and doing all that kind of stuff. Booster.
Oh, yes, absolutely, Booster. It's it's fun. It's funny because that period of time where we're talking about the mid to early '80s folks. Yes, we are of the '80s totally groovy generation, and yeah, man, it was like we had a good group there of people who went to Dallas Christian and also White Rock Church of Christ and some of the other area churches, and just kind of, we saw each other at school, we saw each other at church. Goodness sakes, I remember our Sunday school teacher was even my first grade teacher, Miss Allen, and yep. You just couldn't get away from some folk. but anyway, it's Facebook's one of those wonderful things in which you're able to catch up with old friends that you honestly thought you would never see again, and so I was able to catch up with Michael, and turns out he's in ministry too, and a few weeks ago I did a podcast about how I got into ministry, and ministry is one of those fascinating lives in which I know for a fact many of us who get into ministry, we didn't see ourselves doing that when we were kids, or we get into it and we see especially how ministry is done these days, like on television and whatnot, and we're thinking, goodness sakes, I am not like that person. I don't know, how was it with you, Mike?
Yeah, so growing up, I had always thought that I was going to work for the Walt Disney Company, doing animation or drawing or production in that manner. And I even remember in about junior high, a friend of mine told me that they were thinking about going into ministry, and I laughed. I can't remember if I laughed out loud and derided them, but I totally laughed. And then as my life kind of progressed, I often kind of think about the three callings in ministry. And my first calling was my calling to discipleship to Jesus. And I grew up with a lot of negative thinking, a lot of negative thought processes, and one of those was that I had no friends. And Jeff, were you my friend?
Yes, I was your friend.
Yeah. So I had at least one friend in you, and I had more than that. But I just always constantly thought like I was alone, or that nobody really liked me, or that I really had no close friends, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
I know. It's like, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
When, like I said, I went to Dallas Christian too for the beginning part of my education. My mom was working there too, and Dallas Christian is a private school, is what it is. I went there from pre-K through second grade, and then I was hurled into general population at the Dallas Independent School District. But I remember like from the time that I was there, I even saw, it's like, dude, you always had a crowd of people around you.
Yeah.
It's like you were the guy, you were the Fonz, man.
Well, I appreciate that. I tend to rather think of myself more like Kermit, which it still makes me a Muppet, but I'm surrounded by all kinds of different people.
Yes, I got you. I even got Kermit socks that I wear at the church sometimes.
Excellent. So I can remember being at a church camp or whatever, and it wasn't one of those like I felt compelled during the sixth verse of "Just as I Am" to come forward. But I had a late night. I struggled with insomnia, and I had a late night, and I just came to this decision that I was going to trust that Jesus said he was going to be with me always to the very end of the age. And so if nobody else was going to be with me, I was going to trust that he was going to be with me.
Right.
So I was 14, 15, maybe going on 16. It was a summer, so it was probably between 15 and 16. And so I gave my life to Jesus, and around that time, so that was my first calling. Around that time, we had also gotten a new youth minister who took a interest in me and invited me to everything from going to pick up supplies to Home Depot, to Bible studies, to taking me to, we went to Prestonwood Baptist, and I got a degree in puppetry. Or a certificate in puppetry.
Oh, there you go.
Or whatever. So just doing stuff like that. And I kept getting more and more opportunities to lead and to serve and to be behind the scenes, to be up front, and do all those kind of like ministry tasks that are done. And I really took a moment and I said, okay, God, I've never really asked you what you want for me in my life. And he... almost overnight, the animation, the desire, and the opportunity, really even, to go to California and to do that went away. I mean, it just almost overnight, the industry changed and all kinds of different stuff, and I just didn't feel connected to it, and I kept getting more and more opportunities to lead and to serve. And so that's kind of my second calling. And then I think of the third calling is multiple third callings is when you get called back, in that you have the opportunity to walk away, or ministry doesn't seem like what it was you thought, or some leadership aspect happens, and then you have those opportunities to recommit to that calling. You got to remember the first two, right? The calling to be a disciple and the calling to ministry, and then going back into what you have, I guess, leaning back into what you know is your calling.
Right.
And I had plenty of those opportunities. When I took a job as a campus minister, growing up in Dallas and then moving to Alabama, I grew up in a really conservative church, but a conservative church in Dallas is a little left of every conservative church in Alabama.
Right. Yes.
So really having to kind of, I like being able to cross bridges and hold hands, and sometimes that was difficult and somewhat impossible seeming in some of those instances. And then I moved to Texas, my wife and I did, and started a job, and within 2 months the founding minister at this church that we had kind of bought into and were excited about being a part of, they left.
Right.
I had an instance where all the elders resigned all in one fell swoop.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and so you're left with that.
Yeah.
Walking through COVID, all those kind of things are opportunities to remember your calling and why you are in ministry in the first place, and that's to love God and to love people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things of, I remember when I started preaching school. I got into preaching school when I was 21, and it was late August of 2001. So like 2-3 weeks later, we had the attacks of September 11th, right? And it was just one of those moments of, okay, I had, you kind of have this idea of what you think ministry will be, and then you get smacked upside the head with reality of what the life of ministry is actually going to be. You know what I mean? And it's like, put the potlucks and the fried chicken away. We're going to be having to get down to the trenches with some people and to actually do some full-blown ministry type stuff. And man, I couldn't imagine all the elders just like resigning at once. I mean, I've heard that happen. You're not the only one I've ever heard that happen to. But it's just like, wow, because I'm in a situation where, we've been down here in South Texas now for over 8 years. This is the first place I've actually got to serve under elders.
Mm.
I never, I've been in ministry since 2004, but it wasn't until at the end of 2013 that I actually got to serve at a church with elders.
Yeah.
And so again, it's one of those things that we were talking about earlier. It's we're seeing less preachers, but it's not just that. You look at most of the churches in America right now. Most of the churches in America don't even have elders.
Mm.
So we're coming to a time in which men aren't being equipped and seeing these various leadership roles in the church as either something that they cannot have, something they do not want, or maybe they haven't even felt that calling that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. Well, so I kind of have a theory about some of that, and I'm painting with a big, broad brush. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
And Jeff, you mentioned the early '80s. I consider us still Gen X.
Yeah.
I think we cross boundaries. But I still consider myself Gen Xer.
Well, man, I was born in late '79. I got in there December 20th, so I was born the last days of disco. So I definitely got in.
Nice. And so again, in our time in ministry, right, we've dealt with boomers primarily, and then also with millennials.
Right.
Now, I don't have quite as many theories on Gen Z or any of those kind of things, but just look at those three age groups. I tend to see that boomers have this desire and innate feeling that they, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but that they're in charge, that they have the authority, and also because they're living longer, they're in leadership much longer than any generation maybe before them, and they're capable. They're still capable. They're not, they're not out to pasture or anything like that. They're still in leadership, but so they need to be able to give permission for things to happen in ministry or things to happen within the church.
Okay.
And that's where you get those phrases of, well, let's we've got to ask the elders, or we've got a ministry thing. Somebody has to ask permission in order to start a soup kitchen or to start a Bible study or something like that. So there's this need of for the boomers to have to be give their permission and to give their blessing on things in the church. Then you've got the millennials who aren't going to be as self-disciplined or self-leadership, and so they need to be they have this desire to be asked and to be invited and to be coddled and to be pursued and to be brought in to that. And so if they're not asked, if they're not given a specific task, if they don't see maybe even the ultimate benefit down the road of what that is, they've got to be convinced to be a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where they're sitting. Now, where we sit in the middle, I tend to think of Gen X people as, if they see a problem, if they see something that's going on, that they're just going to put their heads down and either try and fix it or try and address it or whatever. And that puts us in a bad spot, because if we're just going to continue to put our heads down and move forward and see, okay, well, if nobody else is going to step up, then I'm going to do it. If nobody else is going to do it. So we end up kind of overworking ourselves and isolating both sides of that, both of the generations on either side of us, right? Mm-hmm. If we see a problem, we don't ask for permission, which means that we don't maybe walk with humility or walk with a sense of open-handedness that we want everyone to be a part of it. And then also, I don't think, a lot of my Gen X friends, we don't suffer fools very, very well.
Right.
And so we're not going to coddle people. We're not going to invite them in. We're not going to take that extra effort to build a relationship if the task just needs to get done. And so we isolate ourselves often. So we're not the heroes in the generation battles.
Yeah.
But we're not the heels either. I think we've got to figure out a way to embrace what's what's the word I'm looking for here? Como se dice?
Bridging the gap. so to speak.
Yeah, well, we've got to bridge the gap, but maybe for the boomers, we've got to find a way to, in humility, love and seek wisdom and those kind of things. And then on the other side with millennials, we've got to be able to love and to be able to invite and equip the younger generation to be able to do that. So that's kind of my big working theory. I paint with a very broad brush. I know obviously that's just my anecdotal evidence and what I see, but I don't know. I don't know what you see.
Well, what I've seen, I was talking to somebody the other day. Like I said, I grew up, like you, I grew up in Dallas. I'm actually a resident. I used to be a resident of actually inside the city of Dallas. And
yes, yeah. I was working with a church recently, and they've got Garland people on staff, and they're like, Garland.
Yeah, it's like, what? This is what blows me away. And I remember you were still up there, fairly, definitely more recently than I've been. But I remember we had a visitor down here, and I asked, I was like, oh, where are you from? It's great to see you. And they said, well, we're from the Dallas area. It's like, oh, okay. Well, I'm a Dallas native. Where are you from? Waxahachie. I was like, what? What are you talking about, Waxahachie?
Yeah, Waxahachie was not a suburb of Dallas when we were growing up.
No, it was not. I think someone even once told me it was like the Colony. I was like, goodness sakes. I had to go wrestle in the Colony once. That was like over an hour road trip to get out there. I was like, goodness sakes, man. Come on. No, but what I've seen, like growing up in the Dallas area, I was talking to somebody. I think one of the biggest mistakes that churches have done from our generation, maybe a hair before, but definitely afterwards, is the separation of the generations. We churches try to find as many ways as we can to separate all the generations instead of bringing them together. And this is what I mean. I was a product of the big youth group thing. Again, Dallas churches in the 80s and the 90s. Most churches had a very good size youth group programs. And we would have stuff at the other churches, and obviously we would do stuff at our church. And it seemed like regardless of what church that we did something with, if we got to go visit somewhere else, every church we went to had some sort of youth room or youth wing or youth building or something that was other than the main church body, right? So again, the problem was that people were coming to church together, but then we bought into, for some reason, this theory that teenagers just need to be with teenagers. Kids just need to be with kids. Adults just need to be with adults. And so I think that, that separation that we get out in the world, because, schools do the same thing, businesses do that and all this kind of stuff, that has infiltrated the church, whereas the church is supposed to be a great big melting pot of generations. When I was a new parent, I got a 17-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter now, but when I was a new parent, I needed to be around more experienced parents to help guide me, right? And when I was single, I needed to be around other people who either walked that single path or, newly married to help guide me to the next phase. And this was an experience from my life. I look at my own life too. Again, I was a product of the big youth group, but the thing was that when I hit 12th grade, I graduated high school. The theory, again, in the Dallas area, if you're affiliated with the churches in the Dallas area, the idea is, okay, are you going to go to Harding or ACU, right? Because back in the day, Lubbock wasn't even making the conversation yet for whatever reason.
Yeah, Oklahoma wasn't either.
Yeah, neither was Oklahoma. It was either, are you going to ACU or Harding? Well, guess what? I wasn't going to either because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, A. B, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it with my life. And again, the idea of just going to Harding or ACU, that actually had no appeal to me at all. Not because I was a heathen, but because I just didn't like automatically doing everything else that everybody else was doing. And and again, I didn't have direction at that phase of my life, as I talked about and all that. So I didn't go anywhere. I went to Eastfield Community College my first year of college. Harvard on the Hill, Mesquite University, whatever you want to call it. But the thing was, I was still going to Mesquite Church of Christ, but I aged out of the youth group. And I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, you were in no man's land.
I was in no man's land. I didn't feel like I was a part of the adults, right? I was still 18. but at the same time, I went to a couple of youth things, and it didn't feel right, And the guys that I hung around with a bunch of people that were younger than me, but they were seniors now, and they wanted their time. It made all the sense in the world. It was no big deal, but I didn't feel like a part of that, and I didn't feel like a part of this. And I think one of the big reasons was that when I was in the youth group, and I was very active in the youth group, and all the things that we did, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of teaching of, okay, you're going to graduate from this, and you get to move to this. You get to become this. And there wasn't a lot of activity about a teenager becoming an adult, or a Christian teenager becoming a Christian adult and a worker in the church.
Yeah.
And so again, like you said it absolutely right. I was in no man's land. That was a very dark time for me, and one of the reasons it was dark is because I just didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, and I didn't know who to go to for the answers. And so I think some of the generation gap that you were talking about, yeah, I agree with, but I also think that in some cases it's a self-imposed generation gap because we don't bring the elements of the body together, but instead we try to keep it separated.
Right. And when I was in school for youth ministry, and I'll just say this too, I think we're all a product of a generation of our parents' generation before us, of pushing school and university on everybody. That was the solution. That was the way. And I think we're seeing now in the general population where that's moving. And your kids are older than ours by just a handful of years, but we're already having conversations with our soon-to-be 13-year-old and about whether college is right for him or not. And so that's a thing I think that was a product of our time and where we were growing up. But when I was in school for youth ministry, that the conversation had turned. I think we were really seeing what I think we experienced what you talked about, and in youth ministry and in the academic talk of theology of what should constitute not just a youth ministry, but a ministry within a larger church ought to be some sort of integration. And I think I studied under integration 1.0, which was acknowledging the problem and then trying to get older people to volunteer with the youth ministry.
Yeah.
That would have been 1.0. And I think it was a step in the right direction, but I don't know how realized it's actually become. My kids go and sit with us during what you might call big worship, and then they go and serve in one of the ministries for children's class, like Sunday school or something like that, and then they do have their own youth group time during the week, but it is led by other adults, and I see the benefits of them having other adults in their lives from different perspectives and teaching them biblical truths, not just from their preacher dad.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I talked about this. The other day, this last Sunday, I got to baptize my son.
Awesome.
And that was a very touching moment. And one of the best moments of that outside the baptism was that we took pictures with all the people who were there. And we don't have a lot of youth down here, because it is what it is. But the amount of Christian adults that have took interest in my kids. And now it's going to be tempting to whoever's listening. It's like, yeah, but you're the preacher. Those are the preacher's kids. It's like, you know what? That really doesn't have as much to do with it as what you might think.
Right. I'd agree.
The thing about it is that we're present and my kids take part, and they grew up in a house where we expected them to greet other people and get to know other people and to talk to people who are older and younger than they are. In other words, don't just hide behind your generation. Don't just hide behind your age group. But be willing to talk to everybody. And for example, we do a Sunday morning men's Bible study in which 50 of Ethan goes to and has been going to, and even asks if we're doing it this Sunday. I mean, and so in other words, he looks forward to seeing people who are older than him, and and again, I think that helped in his development,
Yeah.
and I pray it continues to do so. And again, I think that's the thing. It's something else that we've come across with, and I've seen this just in my ministry experience and talking to other people who are in ministry also. And you were talking about the older Christians, and again, yeah, the older Christians have a certain mindset. But what's interesting to me that I've seen is the fact that we have way too many older Christians who don't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't know, and I'm not talking about like preaching, song leading, that sort of stuff. I'm talking about sharing your faith.
Yeah.
Basic, what we might call basic evangelism. I believe in God. God loves me. God has blessed my life. Let me tell you how.
Yeah.
Again, you don't have to go in and write a book, but just being able to just do the grunt work, being the salt and light in the world around us. Way too many Christian adults have no knowledge of how to do this. And again, I think that's hurt some of the church culture that we're having to deal with today. It's just we have Christians who are unqualified, basically.
Yeah.
And
I like the phrase, we are educated beyond our level of obedience.
oh wow, that hurts.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so what we're having to do is that we're having to play catch up to a certain extent, trying to raise the new generation on one hand, but on the other hand, trying to equip older Christians who, quite frankly, should have been taught this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I
back
think
in the day.
every day we're being discipled,
Mhm.
and so we are, at the expense of trying to sound like an old curmudgeon.
Saying old curmudgeon, basically, yeah.
I think obviously the culture is a greater discipler than we have been in the church.
Mm-hmm.
I think politics has been the great discipler. I mean, I bet if you got up in church and told your congregation on Sunday that it's been 7 days since you studied your Bible, since you just really kind of opened it just to hear from God's word, and people would maybe gasp, but they'd be like, "Hey, that's all right. Keep going. You got another week." And if you told somebody you didn't vote in a local election, somebody in your church is going to get upset.
Oh, absolutely.
More so than if you told them about you didn't have time to study your Bible.
And on that same point, it wouldn't matter which party you would have voted for, but if you didn't vote.
You didn't vote.
Yeah.
You did not do so. We have discipled our people or the culture has discipled, American culture has discipled our people so much that voting and being engaged in the political process is more important and more valuable than being engaged in the life of the kingdom.
Right.
And that may be harsh. That may be unfair. But I encourage everybody to look deep down and say, are you more engaged in the kingdom of God or the kingdom of America or your local culture or whatever?
No, I don't think that's an unfair statement, and I'll tell you why. You talked about COVID earlier, and we'll talk about citizen here in a little bit. But you started you're kicking at the darkness ministry. Were you doing that in 2020?
No, I was doing it, I guess, kind of personally, and trying to launch. This has always been kind of my end goal.
Right.
But 2020 was when it was really kind of obvious that God was calling us in this direction. So, yeah.
Okay, well, you remember 2020, and 2020 was obviously an interesting year. But, outside of COVID, remember what else was going on there. You started having people protest the NFL because of politics. You started having like not starting here, but we had a rash of riots in the streets and destruction of property and all this stuff. You had, the politics. On top of everything else, 2020 was an election year. So you had all the junk dealing with politics and Trump versus Biden and all the all the stuff that was going on and that, So you had all this stuff happening, and I thought 2020 was an interesting year because also you had people who weren't able to go to work. We had to, we had to stay home and do all that stuff. And so I thought 2020 was an interesting year from an aspect that, in essence, you want to call it, we say God or the world. God was basically showing us and revealing to us all these things in which people put their faith in that were taken away. People put, again, you and I both Dallas natives. For some people, NFL is a religion. I mean, it's, yeah.
The Cowboys can only hurt you if you let them.
Well, this is the funny thing. I'm not a sports fan. I mean, I'm really not. People are like, how can you not be a sports fan growing up in Dallas? Because they try to ram it down my throat. That's why. But yeah, people part of the Cowboys cult, but that was taken away for some people.
Yeah. People's jobs.
Yeah.
People's livelihoods. People's identity in the work that they do.
Yes.
Was forced. That they had to take a new perspective on.
Right. And again, people. Again, I heard this a lot. South Texas is very politically polarizing place. I mean, people get into their politics in a major way. It's and I don't want to get into all that, but that is what it is. So 2020 down in South Texas, I'll just say it this way: it was a very interesting time, in which people believed that their entire life was going to be I'm either going to have a good life or a bad life based on who wins the election, right? Mm-hmm. And so then you also had and again, this was witnessed down here, people doing election day shenanigans and all this. But anyway, at the end of 2020, I had some people come to me and say things like, I can't believe I wasted so much time on football instead of doing what I need to do. Yeah. I can't believe that I spent so much time trying to build a career which was taken away from me because of of all the COVID stuff. I can't believe I wasted so much time in politics and it came to this and nothing positive was done. And again, all this stuff, and I think and for some people 2020 into 2021 was like a great awakening, realizing that how much time do I actually have in life, and how am I using the time that I actually have?
Yeah. Well, the politics thing isn't going to go away.
No.
Right? It comes around every 4 years, every 2 years, right? Right now, you and I were talking, and there was the leak from the Supreme Court about a possible overturning of Roe versus Wade, and you would think that on both sides of the conversations that this is the end-all, be-all, either the end or the be-all. Of everything right now. And so that's going to polarize people in the pews. Unfortunately, it's going to polarize people in the pews. You would think we would all be more in line with preserving life and helping those that need help. So,
well, the thing about it is, though, you and I, now that we're over 40, you think about now we've reached the period of time in which we're able to look back and think about all the things that we have seen, right? And because how much does fear, we talk about the younger folk, the younger generation, how much does this world try to steer the younger generation based on fear? Right. And it's like you just said an interesting thing there. You say, for some people, this is going to be the be-all, end-all. Which side of Roe versus Wade do you sit on? This could be the destruction of the world, or it can be the blessing to the world. But you know what? Michael, we've forgotten. The world has already been destroyed because Elon Musk bought Twitter, and that's going to shut down. That's going to shut down free speech and democracy and moms and apple pie because Elon Musk. But so again, it's like anything that happens in the world right now. It's a polarizing event. Yeah. It used to be that only special things were polarizing events. Now it's anything.
If everything is breaking news, nothing is.
Yes, and that's the thing. When everything is special, when everything is a big deal, nothing is. And, did you think that we would hear so much about Johnny Depp and Amanda Heard?
No, yeah.
It's everything is this big major deal, and if something goes one way, it's going to destroy your life. And it's like, you know what? And we sit back and we think, well, no wonder fear, depression, anxiety, loneliness is I can't even say it, catastrophic levels in our country.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And so now we have, the ministers, or you want to say the churches, this is, it seems like a dark time, but light shines the brightest in the darkest times. This is our moment.
Yeah.
If people were looking for a moment, if they were looking for a space of time in which their, ministry work, their church work, their affiliation with the churches is important, it is now. But it's only going to be now if you're equipped to do the work.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this kicking into darkness thing. Because again, tell me about this. Because you were, how long were you in ministry before you shifted gears?
20 years.
Okay, so wow, you got in there before I did. Okay, but yeah, so 20 years doing lack of a better phrase, full-time ministry, but
Right.
And then you just like shift gears in a crazy way. Take me through this.
So in 2020, 2021, thinking through some of the difficulties that I'd had in ministry and the difficulties I'd had personally. In the last 10 years or so, I've had some crazy physical illnesses and issues to kind of deal with there, getting healthy mentally and emotionally, getting healthy, trying to stay healthy physically, and doing those kind of things, and then being able to be helped with older ministers, through older resources, and to be equipped in kind of that resilience of because ministry takes a toll. It takes a toll on every aspect of our lives.
It does?
Yeah, it sure does. Learning how to rest, learning how to deal with my anxiety, learning how to deal with all of those kind of things, seeing that sometimes ministers bail out because they haven't been equipped for that, or they haven't had the space to be able to talk about those type of things because they're afraid of sharing it in the system and being vulnerable and that being used against them, or the people that they lead alongside, that maybe they're not emotionally in a place or mentally in a place that can handle those kind of things. So finding ways to equip ministers to love God with all of their heart, soul, mind, body, to love their neighbors, to love people around them, and then to understand what their identity is, right? To love your neighbor as yourself. If you don't see yourself as lovable, you're going to have a hard time seeing other people as lovable as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking this opportunity, I've always wanted to work with church groups, to work one-on-one with church leaders, and maybe work with church teams. And so we launched a nonprofit in August of 2021, and it's called Kicking at the Darkness, and my hope is to bring hope, clarity, and strength to ministers and their families and their church teams. And when I use those phrases, hope, clarity, and strength, I often kind of think about it in terms of triage.
Right.
Right. And so hope, that's the red. If you are without hope, if you've lost a vision of who God's called you to be, and that God can use you, and that God still loves you, and that ministry is where you are. If you've lost hope, then it's hard to kind of move forward. And so that's the red. And especially in our world today, right? Sometimes our hope gets shifted. And I use this as an example. Think about the movie you wanted to see in 2020, right? Whatever movie that was, whether it was supposed to be, the Wonder Woman movie, or the new Top Gun, or whatever it is, it kept going, well, it'll happen in the next 3 weeks, right? It'll come back. Or no, we bumped it to 6 months. Well, 6 months came around, then they had to bump it again, mm-hmm. or whatever. And so about the fifth time it got bumped, you probably gave up hope that you were going to be able to see it anytime soon.
Right.
That even if they gave you the next date, I can't put my faith and trust in that date, because it may or may not happen, right? That's completely out of our control. And so I think that's what happened in 2020 with a lot of people in ministry. Is they started 2020 off well, and I guarantee you 95% of the churches started off the year with God's vision, 2020 vision.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so we started out with good intentions, and then that just kept getting knocked down. Right. Everything you thought God had planned kept getting pushed back, and so a lot of people have lost hope in ministry.
Right.
And so want to just find ways to come alongside them, hear their stories, point them in the right direction, let them know they're not alone. Right? I mean, Elijah needed to know that there were 7,000 people who were still faithful, that he wasn't the only one, right? That negative thinking response there that was completely false.
Right.
But the truth shall set you free. And so the truth was you're not alone. And so, or he was not alone. So in the red, people need hope. And then
Right.
the clarity, that's the yellow. Right? Sometimes we just need clarity on what our next steps are. Somebody who can offer perspective, maybe a little bit of coaching, can offer some resources to help get unstuck and to move in the next step, whether that's as an individual trying to figure out, how can I take a better Sabbath day? How can I prepare my sermon calendar plan it out a little bit further so I'm not always rushing on a Saturday night. I can spend time with my family. Right, clarity on just different issues that may be going on. And then the green is the strength. And there are some, even if you've lost hope in some areas, right, you're red in some areas, there's still some areas where you're strong. And so coming alongside of people and resourcing them, connecting them, helping them continue to get strong in all of those areas. That's really what our ministry is about.
Well, you mentioned something earlier, and I found it was fascinating, that the idea of learning to rest and the idea of just being willing to continue on, because it's interesting. Hope, the hope is that preachers do a lot of Bible study, right?
Right.
And so it's you brought up Elijah, which is a great example, but I remember what Stephen talked about in his great defense before they drug him out and stoned him to death. He challenged the Sanhedrin and basically saying, has there ever been a prophet of God that you did not persecute? Mm-hmm. In other words, the Bible is filled with examples in the Old and New Testaments about how the messengers of God weren't always treated the best.
Yeah.
And there was times in which the messengers of God got tired. There's, goodness sakes, in the life of Jesus, there would be times in which he would go off by himself for a time. Mm-hmm. Why do we think he did? Oh, he did that to pray. Yes, he did that to pray, but he also did that to get away from people. Yeah. In other words, my point is like, where was it, or how do you think it started? Because I think you've done more research in this than I have, about how sometimes the preacher feels like they have to be, the spiritual Superman, withstand all, nothing touches them, continue on regardless, and don't show fear, don't show pain, don't show tiredness. You just keep going and work until you die, and then you can go to heaven.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is our Western culture. I think that when you've got a lot of times ministers, and especially if most churches are under 200, right? They're mostly small churches, and they only have really maybe 2 full-time employees, right. And some of those may be bivocational. Mm-hmm. So if they've got 3, that third one is the administrative assistant. Yeah. Right. And so I think you've got this Western perspective that we work and we're entrepreneurial and we don't complain. And then I think you also mix that with however Christian celebrity got wound up in everything in that, and I don't necessarily mean on TV. I mean the idea of the Superman, right? That right. I can't. If I complain, then I'm not being grateful, or I'm not. Jesus said that there will be trouble, and so just because I'm in a season of trouble must mean that I'm being faithful. Yeah. And so
no, it could be also you made some bad mistakes, but anyway.
Right. But I think it comes from that. And I think we've forgotten what the purpose of rest is. We don't, in the West, right? We work and work and work, and then we take a vacation. Right. And then what's the number one thing you hear from people after they've taken a vacation?
They need a vacation from the vacation.
Exactly. Yeah. the perspective in Scripture, and this perspective, I think, for ministers ought to be flipped, in that we work from a place of rest, not that we rest from our work. And you see God resting on the seventh day. He established the Sabbath day, and then we see Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount and through his teaching elevate the Ten Commandments. Right? He elevated every single one of the Ten Commandments. It's not enough just not to murder somebody. We don't be angry at them either. It's not enough to commit adultery. You've got to, their righteousness has to surpass the Pharisees and get to the heart of it, which is don't even lust after a woman.
Right.
And so when he elevates the Sabbath, right, he says the Sabbath wasn't, a man wasn't made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man. And so when we have that perspective, okay, when I rest, God is still in control.
Right.
I'm not the one that I'm laying it down. I'm going to trust you, God, that I sleep for 8 hours and you're going to keep the world turning. Or that when I don't know how to handle this situation between these people at our church, I'm going to pray about it and I'm going to get a good night's sleep and trust that you're working on their hearts.
Yeah, and
trusting that you're going to give me some insight or some ways to help.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when we're talking about Sabbath, because I agree with you, I just want to make sure people are clear. We're not talking about the day of worship. We're talking about the idea of resting,
yes.
Which is, again, the bigger deal, because, again, you look at the Sabbath day that Jesus had to deal with in the days of the Pharisees. I mean, at the beginning, there was the, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. And basically what that meant was that everybody, their servants and their animals, got a day off. No work is to be done. And then when you get to the days of Jesus in the first century, the Sanhedrin and the rabbis and tradition turned that into a categorical system where, I remember I was studying some lesson and they threw out an example talking about how it got to the point where if you were to toss a stone, they would debate, was it a throw, which is illegal on the Sabbath, or was it a lob, which was permissible on the Sabbath? And it got to that point. And so if you can put yourself back into the first century people's sandals, if you were a first century Jew in the days of Jesus, would you look forward to the Sabbath day?
So, when I turned 30, I decided I was going to take a page out of the A.J. Jacobs book, and there's another author, The Year of Living Like, A.J. Jacobs is The Year of Living Biblically, and then the other book, and I can't remember the author's name, but it's The Year of Living Like Jesus. And I decided for the month of April, that was my birthday when I'm turning 30, April 1st is my birthday, that for that entire month,
insert joke here. Yeah,
I know. I was going to try and live as close to the life of Jesus as I could, right? So I didn't cut the sides of my hair. I tried to do some research into, what a first century Jew would do. And so I wore a prayer shawl during that week. Nobody really, I didn't do it outside so people would think I'm weird.
Right.
But I tried to eat as kosher as I could. And then I had 4 opportunities to practice the Sabbath, right? Like the rule keeping.
Right.
And the first week was fine, but almost every other week, I was concerned more about keeping the rules than I was about resting.
Right.
I would get worried. Well, can I do this or can I not do that? Is this starting a fire? Right? As some would say, a very Orthodox Jewish person might say, opening the refrigerator and an incandescent bulb is in there. That is starting a fire. And when you close the door, it's extinguishing a fire. And so working through all those and I caught myself caught up in the rules, and so it wasn't restful for me. So I'm not about holding to the letter of the law when it comes to resting. But I think that we have underestimated the importance and the necessity of rest, especially in ministry.
Yes. It's like I look forward to Mondays. Monday is my day off. And apparently there was a situation yesterday where somebody came up to the building looking for the preacher, because secretary and everybody comes up, and they said they were looking for the preacher. And she said, well, today's his day off. And he just looked at her and said, preachers don't get days off.
Yeah.
And then again, that's That's the idea. And again, it's one of those things. I mean, obviously, if an emergency happened on a Monday, I would be right there. But it's just I just don't come to the office.
Right.
That's the I'm doing other things. I'm tending to other things, and
Well, even like say in youth ministry, right? A lot of times youth ministers, their day off or their Sabbath day is on a Friday.
right,
Well, guess what? They're probably going to a football game that Friday night. At least one weekend in the fall and one weekend in the spring, they're probably on a Friday getting everything together for a retreat.
mm-hmm.
And so, it's not the letter of the law. Oh, I can't.
Yeah,
I can't drive the church van on a Friday.
right,
That's not it. But it's putting systems in place and a perspective in place that prioritizes rest so that you can continue to do the ministry long term.
and that's the
And
goal. Yes,
yeah,
long-term ministry, not just flash in the pan.
yeah. Yeah, and I also think too, it's not just a day off once a week, or some people oftentimes think like a sabbatical 7-10 years into ministry where you get 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever time that's the answer. I think that there's a regular rhythm of rest that starts with getting a good night's sleep
Yeah,
as often as you can,
right,
right? I mean that's the basic building block of rest. And then the idea of, okay, so that's every day. Then what can I do once a week? What can I do? Is there some way I can do something monthly or quarterly? Making sure I take my vacation time and prepare for it in such a way that I don't feel like I've crammed, 52 weeks of fun and rest into 7 days in the
right.
Bahamas, or 7 days. We used to go down to Marfa during Thanksgiving break, and there's nothing to do there, and that is. I can sit in a hammock and I can read and I can listen to music and we can cook and eat and do that kind of. That's my type of vacation.
Yes.
My wife wants to do all kinds of activities and things like that. So I
Right.
loved when we went to Marfa. The most exciting thing was to walk around Fort Davis.
Right.
So anyway, it's finding those. It's prioritizing rest. It's planning the rest, right? What is that going to look like daily, weekly, monthly, whatever? And then it's protecting it. And I think for us as brothers in ministry, brothers and sisters in ministry, that we be able to ask each other, hey, are you getting enough rest? Are you doing that? One of the things I'm grateful for with this ministry is I've been able to fill in for people up here in the Metroplex that have taken a vacation or need some time off, and I've been able to fill in for leading worship and preaching a handful of times. So helping one another protect it. I would hope that at a church where somebody comes up and says, "Well, I need to talk to the preacher." Well, it's his day off. Well, preachers don't get days off. I would hope that the leadership would be able to say, "Well, ours does."
Yeah.
Ours, we prioritize rest around here, and because he was ministering to everybody on their day off, he gets a day off.
Yeah. Yeah.
So our leadership has to protect our ministers as well, because even people within our churches are going to, well, what does he do all day? He just sits around and studies the Bible. No, that's not true. That our ministers work hard and they rest well. I think that's important.
Yeah, because again, it's the type of lifestyle, and I think all Christians should have this type of lifestyle.
Yes,
I've learned this in going to like business seminars. When somebody would point to their mouth and they would say, "This is your office." And in other words, you take it with you, regardless of where you go. And so again, it goes against that Western mindset of you go to work, you go to an office. This is where you work. This is where you ply your trade, and then you go home. You don't have to do it anymore. Well, it's like that's not the way it's supposed to be in ministry. That's not the way it's supposed to be in the Christian life.
Right.
We take it with us regardless of where we go. And again, if we're able to have some moment of peace, it's like a praise God for it, because all people need it. And including those who are in ministry, it's super important. It's hard to, you're just carrying drama, or you're encountering drama, dealing with people, because dealing with people is difficult,
Yep.
and so it's just, you just need that peace sometimes. You just need to be away, and I agree with you. That's the type of vacation. You just go and chill somewhere, and just not have to worry about doing anything. It's like when I go on vacation, I don't take my laptop, and I turn my cell phone off. I take it with me in case we need it for emergencies, but I turn it off. Just because it's like I'm away and I'm being with my family.
Yeah.
We have elders; they can handle such. We have,
Well, and there
ministry.
goes to equipping, right?
Yeah,
Equipping your leadership, and helping them be able to do things like that. I used to have a kind of a list of like 10 things that might happen in an emergency, or that I don't have to be the only one doing. And so I wanted to train them. Everything from how do you here's my here's my process for baptizing somebody,
right.
right? Like all the way to how you dip them into the water.
Yes.
Because some of our elders haven't ever done that. Maybe they've
Yeah.
done it for their kids 30 years ago, but they didn't do it for anybody else. And so helping them, here's how you answer a phone call. Here's how you do a hospital visit. Kind of doing some of those 101 things. Maybe that's a great idea for somebody, is to make a list of those 10 recurring things that you do that other people can do.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
then find ways to teach that.
Yes, because I think that's something that I've said for years. It's like, look, all people are replaceable, even us.
Yes.
And because there's either going to come a time in which we lose the ability, or we're taken out of the game. I don't plan on living forever. I know you're not planning on living forever. I mean, it's who's going to pick up the ball after we're good, after we're done, and that goes
Right.
back to equipping and looking forward to the next generation.
Right.
Well, this has been awesome, man. And I think that would be a good place to kind of put a pin in it. And I thank you for your time. Where can people find you if they want to find you?
Yeah,
Like-
so I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. On Instagram, it's MJ Felker, Felker, MJ Felker, and then it's kickingatthedarkness.com, and they can go on there and partner with us through prayer. They can see what what things I'm offering. So whether that's one-on-one coaching, whether that's team building, I've been doing that quite a bit, of meeting with church teams and helping them kind of assess where they want to go in their next steps, doing some personality tests, helping them work together, do teamwork better. So you can see those kind of things on kickingatthedarkness.com.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. Well, God bless you, brother, and we thank you for your time, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you.
Uh-huh. Bye-bye.